The yelling was louder than the village cockerel crowing at dawn. I remember the sting in my ears as Ben's mother, Mrs. Allen, shouted so loud, you'd think the ground might shake. "You're useless, Ben. Good-for-nothing slowpoke." Her voice echoed around, bouncing off every thatched hut. The boy just stood there, staring at his feet, his face like a mask, hiding whatever was inside. I wasn't sure if he could even feel the shame anymore. Once upon a time, in a small village named Aroa, there lived a family known for their hard-working spirit and humble lifestyle. Mr. Allen was a well-respected carpenter, known across Aroa for his skills in carving intricate furniture and repairing the villagers' homes. His wife, Mrs. Allen, was often at home, taking care of their 3 children, Emma, Dan, and Ben. Emma and Dan were both praised for their quick minds. Emma was smart and sharp, always topping her class and bringing pride to her parents. Dan was following in her footsteps, getting good grades, and helping their father with small tasks around the house. But Ben was different. Ben was the eldest, but he wasn't like his siblings. His mind worked in slow, quiet ways. School was a struggle, and whenever he tried to help his father, he moved like molasses, fumbling with tools, making small mistakes. His family had little patience with him. To them, Ben was just slow, a burden, a disappointment. Every evening, when Mrs. Allen gathered with the neighbors, gossiping in loud voices, Ben's name would always come up. "That boy has no future," she'd say with a sigh, shaking her head. "He's just a useless dreamer." The other women would nod, their eyes full of pity or silent agreement. Even Mr. Allen, who was known for his calm, would let out frustrated sighs whenever Ben struggled to keep up with simple tasks. In school, things were no better. Ben would sit at the back of the class, alone, watching his classmates race ahead in their studies. The teachers grew tired of him, never calling on him, never expecting him to answer. He was just there. Something happened that would change Ben's life and the entire village's perception of him. One day, there was a terrible incident in Aroa. A big storm rolled through, sudden and fierce, tearing off roofs, knocking down trees, and flooding the narrow roads. Villagers rushed to secure their homes and belongings. In the chaos, a young child named Lily went missing. She had been playing by the river when the storm hit, and no one knew where she was. The villagers were frantic, shouting her name, running up and down the riverbanks, but Lily was nowhere to be found. The water was rising fast, muddy and dangerous, and the villagers were afraid to get too close to it. Most stood back, murmuring and praying. But then, someone noticed Ben standing at the edge of the river, staring at the water, lost in thought. "Look at him, daydreaming when there's trouble," one of the villagers muttered. But Ben didn't seem to hear. He suddenly stepped forward, taking off his shoes, rolling up his pants. Before anyone could stop him, he was wading into the fast-moving current. "Ben, get back," Mr. Allen shouted, his face twisted with fear and anger. But Ben didn't look back. He moved carefully, inch by inch, his eyes scanning the water with a strange focus that none of us had ever seen before. As the water swirled around his legs, Ben suddenly stopped. He knelt down, reaching into the muddy river, and pulled something up a little hand. It was Lily, clinging weakly to a branch that had drifted close to the shore. She looked exhausted, barely able to hold on. The villagers gasped, watching as Ben wrapped his arms around her, steadying himself against the current. He lifted her up, holding her tight, and slowly made his way back to the riverbank. Everyone rushed to help him as he reached the shore, pulling both of them out of the water. Lily was safe. For a moment, there was silence. Then someone said, "He saved her." It was just a whisper, but it spread through the crowd like wildfire. Ben, the useless boy, had done what none of us could have. He had saved a life. As Ben sat on the riverbank, soaked and shivering, everyone stared at him, stunned. Lily's mother rushed forward, scooping her daughter into her arms, tears streaming down her face. She kept saying, "Thank you, Ben. Thank you," over and over, her voice breaking. The crowd murmured, all eyes fixed on Ben as if they were seeing him for the first time. Mrs. Allen pushed through the crowd, her face pale, mouth slightly open. She looked at her son, the same son she had called useless just hours before. Slowly, she reached out to touch his shoulder. Ben looked up at her, his eyes tired but calm. For the first time, there was no sign of shame or hesitation in his gaze. He seemed at peace. That night, word of Ben's bravery spread through the village. People gathered around the Allens' small house, bringing food, warm blankets, and heartfelt thanks. "Your boy is a hero," they told Mrs. Allen. "He risked his life for that little girl." Mrs. Allen tried to smile, but I could see the regret in her eyes. I wondered if she was starting to realize just how wrong she had been about him. In the days that followed, the villagers began to treat Ben differently. People would greet him warmly on the road, asking how he was, offering small jobs, and even inviting him to join their evening gatherings. He still moved at his own slow pace, but now, instead of ridicule, there was a quiet respect in the way they looked at him. They no longer saw him as useless. They saw him as a boy with a kind heart and steady courage. Then, something unexpected happened. Mr. Olu, an elder in the village known for his wisdom and connections, came to visit the Allens. He asked to speak with Ben privately. After their talk, Mr. Olu made an announcement to the entire village. He explained that he had a friend in the city who ran a small business and was looking for an apprentice to train in repairs and craftsmanship. He thought Ben would be perfect for it. "Ben has a good eye," Mr. Olu said, smiling, "and the patience for detail. He might just have a talent that none of us ever saw before." Ben's parents were hesitant, unsure of letting their son go to the city alone. But Ben, for the first time, seemed certain. He wanted to go. Mr. Allen looked at Ben, searching his son's face, as if seeing it for the very first time. Finally, he nodded, clapping a hand on Ben's shoulder. "If this is what you want, son, then we'll support you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Mrs. Allen wiped her eyes, trying to hide her tears. She managed a small smile, but everyone could see the worry and the pride in her face. A week later, the entire village gathered to see Ben off. Mr. Olu had arranged everything. Ben would stay with his friend, Mr. Okoro, a respected craftsman who specialized in furniture repair and design. Mr. Okoro had no children of his own and was more than happy to have Ben as his apprentice. As the cart pulled away, Ben waved at everyone, his face a mixture of excitement and nervousness. The villagers cheered him on, calling out their blessings. "Make us proud, Ben," they shouted, and for the first time, Ben smiled in a way that lit up his whole face. Life moved on in Aroa, but Ben's story had left a mark. Every now and then, the villagers would talk about him, wondering how he was doing, if he was learning new skills, if he was happy. His parents felt the emptiness in their home without him, but the pride they felt was stronger. Months passed and news trickled in. Letters from Mr. Okoro spoke of Ben's progress. He was learning quickly, mastering the craft with patience and focus. Mr. Okoro was impressed by Ben's attention to detail and how he approached each piece of furniture as if it held its own story. The slow boy, it seemed, had finally found his rhythm. Then, almost a year after he left, Ben returned to Aroa. The villagers gathered at the edge of the village when they heard the news, eager to welcome him home. When Ben stepped out of the cart, they hardly recognized him. He looked taller, more confident, and there was a calm strength in his eyes. But he wasn't alone. Behind him, Mr. Okoro and a few other craftsmen were unloading large, beautifully crafted pieces of furniture. Ben had returned with gifts, tables, chairs, and intricately carved stools for his family and the village. Mr. Allen and Mrs. Allen's eyes filled with tears as they embraced their son. The villagers were speechless as they admired Ben's work. The boy they once called useless had returned as a skilled craftsman, bringing beauty and pride to their village. As Ben and Mr. Okoro began setting up the pieces around the village square, the villagers marveled at the beauty and craftsmanship. The people of Aroa whispered to one another, filled with awe. They had underestimated Ben, judging him only by his quiet ways and slow pace. Now they saw him for who he truly was, a young man of talent, patience, and quiet courage. And from that day on, no one in Aroa ever called Ben useless again. Ben's journey teaches us that everyone has their own unique talents and strengths. Just because someone is different or takes a little longer to find their path doesn't mean they are without value. Sometimes, the quietest, most underestimated people have gifts waiting to be discovered. Patience, kindness, and belief in others can help uncover hidden potential. Remember, success and courage come in many forms, often from those we least expect. Thank you so much for watching. If this story touched you, please take a moment to share your thoughts below. What did you learn? Did this story remind you of anyone you know? Share your own insights in the comments. If you enjoyed this story, please like, share, and comment. Let's spread a message of kindness and belief in others.